Proverbs say, every day is for the thief, one day for the owner of the house. But ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission, has reversed the role. It is now every day for the owner of the house. If you're involved in bribery, over-invoicing, or any shady deal, the day of reckoning has come. ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission, is watching you. If you're reported for any corrupt practice, you'll be investigated, prosecuted, and punished. Corruption is harmful to our nation. Join the campaign against it by reporting any corrupt practice to ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission.
Let we join hands with ICPC, make them better.
Let's make Nigeria great again.
ICPC, they want you.
Hand for corruption.
Break the chain of corruption now. Don't give, don't take. This message is brought to you by ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission.
Corruption not in my country.
Give him his shoes somewhere here. His phone and everything.
Bye-bye.
Hey,
Where do you-
Oga, where do you think you are going?
Oh, you never shake body.
Eh?
You never shake body.
Shake
Wait,
body,
wait.
see? Eh? Eh?
Never shake body.
I no get combo for my body.
You go take for here. Sit down there.
Afama.
What's this man still doing here?
They say I do shake body. I shake body, I shake body. They say I do this. And I say I no get combo.
You are asking for money.
Sorry, ma'am.
Asking for money to bail a suspect is an act of corruption. Both of you will be punished. Corruption is not allowed within the force. Remember,
Police is your friend. Giving and taking bribe is wrong.
corruption not in my country.
Stop corruption now.
Corruption not in my country.
Corruption has harmful consequences for both public and private organizations. For those faced with high-level corruption, it increases the cost of doing business and undermines their efficiency and effectiveness in service delivery. However, one tested and effective method of dealing with corruption has been collective action against the scourge. What is collective action? How can this approach help in achieving desired objectives? Today on the program, we shall be looking at multi-stakeholder collaboration as panacea for corruption. My name is Murna Barnabas Atiayi. We will provide answers to the above questions after the segment on anti-corruption stories. Hawa Sani is standing by. Over to you, Hawa.
Welcome to this segment. I am Hawa Garba. The chairman of ICPC, Professor Bolaji Owasonye, has said that in fighting systemic corruption, the Commission has chosen to lay more emphasis on prevention because of its efficacy and cost effectiveness. Professor Owasonye said this during a media briefing on the outcome of Phase 1 of ICPC's constituency project tracking exercise held at the Commission's headquarters in Abuja recently. He explained that a tactical way of approaching systemic corruption is to have a mixed bag of enforcement and prevention strategies, with the balance tipping in favor of prevention for resounding success.
When I resumed with the board, and given the little knowledge that I have with regard to the challenge we have with corruption, it was clear to me that we needed to follow a different track and a different approach of dealing with issues aside from the focus on only persons of interest. I was interested in activities that would have a single activity that could have macro impact and effect on the society, especially with focus on the most vulnerable people.
Professor Owasonye spoke about some corruption prevention packages in the Commission's arsenal, although public perception seems to favor enforcement over prevention and enlightenment activities.
We needed to design programs around this issue that will help us to keep the money or wisely use the money that is appropriated rather than pursue it after it is stolen. So 3 things we decided to do. The first and the major and the most talked about is the constituency project. The second, of course, was to adopt a different approach to something that the Commission had been doing before I resumed, called System Study Review. And the third, which looked at the way that MDA spent personnel and capital budget. And the third was to look at the vulnerability of ministries and agencies to corruption. If I come with certain parameters and principles to your media agencies, I can predict which agencies are more highly prone to corruption and those that have standards that will diminish corruption. So we administered what is called an ethics compliance scorecard. We administered it on about to rate MDAs in terms of risk assessment and vulnerability. So you can tell by what we find that something is going wrong in this place. It's likely to be more prone to corruption. And the essence of that is to be able to communicate it to those who are, so that they can change the method. And then you have less corruption, retain the funds and all that. So those are 3 major things that we did.
On some of the successes recorded so far from ICPC's corruption prevention activities in recent times, the ICPC boss revealed that the exercise has successfully made many constituency project contractors return to sites they had hitherto abandoned, even in locations not scheduled for tracking under phase 1 of the exercise.
We noticed that with our enforcement action, a number of people went back to site on their own. Over 200 went back to site on their own, contractors, even in locations where we had not gone to. We found, of course, that some projects were allocated, appropriations made. Some people just decided to do what they liked, either by changing the project location or modifying the project, just at whim. Okay? So we found out in some situations where sponsors wanted projects for their location, they put it on their personal land without assigning the land to the community. So if that sponsor, if he's a legislator or otherwise, lost the election next time, there is disagreement in the community, they can say, this thing is on my land. They can just fence it around, end of story. Okay? So we found out that, as I said, the reports of the quantity surveyors taught us that a number of the projects, in some cases there were no designs to go forward. Where there were designs, sometimes they were ignored and all that. These are all findings. And once you put publicity to it, you are able to avoid repetition because everything had been opaque and operating. So these are some of the things that we found.
The Special Advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari on National Social Investment Programs, Mrs. Mariam Uwais, has expressed confidence in ICPC's capacity to use its expertise and technical know-how in blocking leakages and tackling corruption in the implementation of the social investment programs. Mrs. Uwais was speaking at the State House during the training of ICPC operatives on monitoring the implementation of the social investment programs, namely National Homegrown Feeding Program, Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program, NPower, and National Cash Transfer Program. She expressed the concern that sometimes funds made available for the various components of the programs don't get to the beneficiaries in full, as some of them were intimidated, exploited, and extorted by these officials.
What we're worried about, what is emerging, is the fact that our beneficiaries at the other end are being extorted, they're being intimidated. Many of them are receiving these monies for the first time in their lives. They never held 10,000 naira. And the state officials, the local government officials, we hear, we get reports that they're being extorted, they're intimidating them, telling them we're going to take this money away from you. I mean, we're going to remove you from the database if you don't give us. In some cases, when they give a woman 10,000, they take 8,000 away from her. It's really, really disgraceful. And by the time they put all this money together, they are taking millions.
She therefore enjoined ICPC to leave no stone unturned in bringing these saboteurs to justice for the benefit of the Nigerian masses. Earlier, in his opening remark, ICPC Chairman Professor Bolaji Owasonye, who was represented by the Director of Public Enlightenment and spokesperson for the commissions, Mrs. Rashidat Okodwa MNI, disclosed that the collaboration with NSIO was principally to reduce the incidence of corruption in the social investment programs.
We all know why we are here. This is the second time we are having a major interface with the National Social Investment Office. The first time wasn't too long ago in this very same hall where our collaboration was launched, the collaboration of ICPC with NSIO. And that collaboration principally is to reduce corruption in the implementation of the National Social Investment Projects.
Also speaking during the training, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Social Investment Programs, Barrister Ismail Ahmed, stated that NSIO was leveraging on the expertise and professionalism of ICPC to achieve the aim of the programs. The ICPC operatives were trained on how to operate the Track With Us monitoring software, a web and mobile application designed to drive operational efficiency for monitoring purposes.
This is Corruption Must Go, reaching you from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. Collective action refers to action taken together by a group of people whose goal is to achieve a common objective. Over the years and even currently, ICPC has been involved in quite a few collaborations aimed at diminishing sectoral corruption. What are these collaborations? How effective has this approach been? And how can it be sustained? We spoke with the Commission's spokesperson, Mrs. Rashidat Aduni Okodwa, MNI.
Thank you very much. There's been a series of collaborations since the inception of ICPC, but I'll just speak to the major ones because there are collaborations that may be individual agency to ICPC level, but there are larger collaborations that involve several other agencies, in one effort, towards achieving one particular goal with regard to diminishing corruption in the society. Let me speak to the very first major one ICPC had with the Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council. It's NRDC for short, and they are based in Sheda. They are the statutory body that have the powers to make, to develop curricula for the Nigerian educational system. ICPC collaborated with them in year 2. We started that collaboration in 2003, and it's culminated into a series of things. When we collaborated with them, we were trying to have an intervention in the educational sector, catching the children young, teaching them values. So we wanted a way to get into the school system, and they were the vehicle through we got into the system. But in that collaboration, it wasn't just with NRDC. We pulled in Code of Conduct Bureau, we pulled in Public Complaints Commission. WAEC was also involved. We were trying to develop a brand new curriculum, but that curriculum, is not known in the school system as anti-corruption curriculum. It's called National Values Curriculum, but doesn't exist as a subject. Rather, the elements, that is, components of that curriculum are infused into several subjects in the school system. So after the initial development, we got it approved by the Nigerian Council on Education. It's now in the school system. Talking about another sector, the maritime sector, the ports, and also the airports, not just the maritime sector. But we started with the maritime sector, whereby we collaborated with the Nigerian Ports Authority, Nigerian Shippers Council, Nigeria Customs Service, immigrations, NDLE, and several other agencies. But importantly, that port project was embarked upon by ICPC and then TUGA. TUGA is the Technical Unit on Governance and Anti-Corruption Reforms, and then Bureau of Public Procurement, BPP. Together as partners, we then moved into the maritime sector to study the weaknesses in port operations. And the other agencies I had mentioned beforehand we needed that collaboration with them, and with them successfully we had done that exercise there, and it also had yielded a lot of positive result. There's a major one that started in April this year. We call it the Constituency Project Tracking Group. It's a group made up of ICPC, leading. Then we have other stakeholders who are collaborating with ICPC on that project. Some of the stakeholders are NIQS, that's the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors. We also have BPP again. BPP is really vital when you're talking corruption, because a lot of corruption happens in procurement issues. So BPP is a collaborator on the CPTG. The Accountant General Office is also a collaborator. Budget Office is also a collaborator. Auditor General's Office. Then we have members of the media, as well as several civil society organizations. Together, we have embarked on this tracking of constituency projects. Constituency projects are those projects that lawmakers sponsor into the federal budget for their constituencies, for several developmental projects at constituency level, maybe schools, water, health, health centers, and so on and so forth, or empowerment programs. So that's another level of collaboration. Then the one I mentioned before now, which is the NSIO collaboration, that's the most recent. There's a collaboration between ICPC and NSIO. NSIO is the National Social Investment Office. It's an office that is established to look into empowering the poorest of the poor, and not just empowering the poorest of the poor, creating platforms for people to get engaged, creating employment, avenues for employment for our youth. The collaboration was because NSIO discovered that there are some sharp practices happening in the implementation of that program. So ICPC was called in to for this collaboration to diminish the corruption that occurs, or if possible, totally eradicate avenues for corrupt practices in the implementation of the NSIO projects. Very effective. There's this adage, I don't know how to quote it accurately, but there's an adage or a saying to the effect that you can walk fast if you walk alone, but you walk farther when you walk together. I hope I'm not putting it the wrong way. What it says, what it teaches is the power of teamwork, the power of synergy. Of course, if one person is going, you can go very, very fast, but then you tire out very easily too. You probably don't get to the end of the line. But if you go all in groups together, of course there'll be some slow coaches, there'll be some fast people, but together, each person leaning on each other, you attain your objective at the end of the day. So we have found this approach very useful, because we have found that, for example, the CPTG, NIQS has the training, the skill, the background to assess value for money in projects. ICPC doesn't have that. In fact, we're just learning to do that through their assistance. ICPC needed information from Budget Office on how much money had been released for this constituency project. If we don't groom Budget Office to be a partner in this project, yes, they might give us the information, but maybe at their own pace when they like. But now, as active partners, we find that they're very ready and willing to give us the information that we need across board like that. So you see, with collaboration, you do a lot more, because each agency has its own special area has its own unique area of policy implementation. And ICPC, even though we tend to cover a lot of areas in terms of the fact of trying to diminish corruption in several sectors, there are sectors we don't have the skills for, or we don't have access to the information. Other people are in possession of such of such information. So we need their collaboration, we need their cooperation to get the work moving. So we found it very, very useful. To sustain it, you need to review what you have done at several levels. When you review, you're able to say, okay, I still need this partner, or I don't need this partner. Or you're able to review and say, I need more partners. So that's the way to sustain it. You have to first of all assess, have you achieved with this collaboration? Then, going forward, how can you achieve more, either with expanding or shrinking the team? So it's something that can be sustained with a regular interrogation and review of your outcomes at each stage.
We also spoke with Idayat Hassan, Director, Center for Democracy and Development, West Africa, and she gives us her perspective on the importance of collaborative action in tackling corruption.
I think our collective approach in fighting corruption, one, will have to do with our definition of what we stand for as a country. Are we a country where we expect to see development in the next 10 years? Are we really on the chart to become the new China, really, or Singapore, which we all like to make reference to? One, it has to do with our national identity, importantly. Then we have to start talking about the cluster approach. How do we bring about effectiveness in our little clusters? And our little clusters also means that the private sector should be heavily involved in addressing the issues of corruption. What will be the role? The church, the traditional institution, the mosque, they all have important role to play in terms of curtailing and corruption in a society. How effectively are we using the young women, the young people, women, and other vulnerable groups like persons with abilities? I don't like to call them persons with disability. They are able persons, and they are all actively involved in the fight against corruption. So when you look at corruption from a sectorial approach, and you see that this corruption is actually affecting the factors of production, how do we, for instance, make the private sector realize that if there are no corruption in the chain, they make more money? So when we start incentivizing, we are talking of a cohort, a cluster approach. We are making people to see that, look, listen, cancel the corruption in the power sector, to come together as a private sector to bring about effectiveness. The effectiveness in this sector is actually going to make sure that you make more money. That will be an incentive to curb corruption. And those are the kind of new practices that are actually coming up in different parts of the country itself.
We also spoke to some stakeholders on the same subject matter. Here are their views.
For me, personally, I look at corruption more. If we can tackle it we can prevent. We need to be proactive. We don't wait until things happen, because most of these things, people don't even get to know. They involve in most of these things without knowing.
It's very simple. It's to follow the due process and to make it transparent. And that's why it has been provided for that CSOs, actors are involved at some initial process of procurement. And with this, even the procurement departments of each ministry, even for the contractors, because procurement is actually very, very important, because that's the starting point of telling us whether a project is going to fail or succeed.
It is obvious from all we have heard that unilateral action cannot quite solve the problem of corruption. Entities must join forces to act collectively against corruption by consolidating their individual knowledge resources to achieve greater impact through clear-cut lines of unified actions. That's our package on today's edition of the program. Keep a date with us same time next week. I am Murna Barnabas Atiai. Bye for now.